vampires.
Well, I think
it's harsh, but it's just the truth. And until we start dealing with the truth, as uncomfortable as it is, we will suffer. And I know some things that we say are uncomfortable.
Someone wanted to know if applying for a job rebonds you.
Not necessarily. Applying for a job in not proper person bonds you. However, by international law, they're obligated to have access to the resources. And this is back to why we keep telling people activate the restoration of Article 3, consular court venue, which has been neutralized by sellouts among us, particularly since Dwight D. Eisenhower, when they start promoting their Negro marching civil rights leader guys under the guise of liberating our people. And our people didn't know it was a form of rebonding our people. And that's a fact. So don't get caught up in personalities.
Well, I want to thank you, Grand Sheik, for all of this, again, great information. And that there's some question here from me to update the October 29th, which we've just discussed that we're going to change that date to the 30th, which is a Saturday instead of Friday, which will give us an earlier start time. So we were going to do a 2-day event, Friday and Saturday, but we're going to move it to just the 30th and start around, open the doors around 11 and start at noon.
So that people have, so we can have people have travel time.
Travel time.
So it's mainly with the consideration of making sure that people, after the affairs are over, that you have good travel time.
And then it won't be as late. So
last time we were about 3 o'clock in the morning. 2 o'clock in the morning. No, it's closer to 3 o'clock in the morning.
So that'll be coming out soon, but this circle the 30th, which is a Saturday, the Sabbath, instead of Friday the 29th, and we'll get more details because now we're going to try to get some more that you might want to see to be involved. And so we just want to get more information, but the 30th of October is our new date for that. We want to thank you. I have a little promo.
Yes, do the promo, please.
Yeah, so I have a little promo that I want to play for my channel, which is Dr. G's Official. I want to thank everyone who went out and went over there to Dr. G's Official and what did you do? You signed up. You registered for my channel. Thank you so much. And now I'm looking for some really great guests. And so the other day I was just sitting here at the computer and I just started talking off the cuff. So it was just very raw and very rough, but I'll talk for about 4 minutes. And Grand Sheik, you think I should share this with this? I want to share this since there's so many folk on here because you might be one of my guests because a lot of you have giftings and so forth. Well, look, let me stop talking. Let me just pull it up here on there. And
successful presidential campaign of William Henry Harrison and boosted by the subsequent founding of his Tribune newspaper, also became heavily involved with the aforesaid Whiggamore Party, which was later referred to as the Whigs, WHIGS. It shall be noted that this hybrid European-dominated political order and radical party thereafter was and almost always spoken about, known or called by its shortened form, the Whigs. Now, these are some of the facts known of the man Horace Greeley and of his influences and activities. Few notations are given so as to assist the reader or observer as an ancillary in maintaining a reasonably close or more accurate view and timely concept of, about, and on his politics and his opinions, etc. Number one, Horace Greeley was the founder of the Republican Party. 2, Horace Greeley initiated an investigation of the United States Congress, of which he was a participant. He was an active member of the House of Representatives for 3 months However, his unrelenting candor, uncompromised outspokenness, and generally principled character made him less than popular with many of his colleagues. 3. Horace Greeley gave strong and affirmative support to Abraham Lincoln's candidacy for the presidency of the United States. 4. Horace Greeley urged President Lincoln to end slavery that passionately suggested pressure came from Greeley even before Lincoln himself demonstrated evidence in showing a willingness to act upon that institutionalized and banal form of human trafficking, peonage, and social corruption. 5. Horace Greeley was one of the most prominent active political figures among the hybrid European sons at North America. He strongly promoted the adopted practice among the sons and daughters of European descent to take for themselves the social status title of quote unquote white people, from which they were formerly excluded. Thus, Greeley was a key propagator of promoting the practice of the occupying hybrid Europeans adopting the practice of arbitrarily taking on the free white person's social status. Thus, the hybrid Europeans have since 1854 been socially trading places in the social structure with the politically and economically weakened Aboriginal noble Moors, the sovereign rulers of the land, America. In context with the social, economic, and political events involving and surrounding Horace Greeley, the transitional times and undoubtedly reflective of the concerns of other European sons and daughters, one must be cognizant of the prevailing cultural state influenced by some of the long-lasting and harsh standards set forth and institutionalized via King Hammurabi Bey's Code of Law. Keep in mind the general the general disconnect maintained among the masses due to the inquisitor operations of massive book burnings and other extreme forms of literary destruction, as formerly stated, the true history of the Moabite Moorish nation was being systematically suppressed, distorted, veiled, and hidden. This suppressed chronology is known and kept in silence by some, unknown by others, and in the same instance, preserved by way of secret societies such as Freemasonry, Knights of Columbus, and Daughters of the American Revolution, etc. And much of the true history of the world and of the Aboriginal natural peoples is void of exposure to the general public and to the masses. This absence of revelation is not by accident, nor by oversight. Therefore, the disassociate conditions reflective of the natural peoples, as caused by the absence of those many veiled truths, has spawned many unnecessary schisms and hatreds. A general lack of knowledge about the true yet suppressed history of and about the natural peoples of the land of the Western Hemisphere and of the world also promotes disassociation by creating and encouraging the very static mental state of mind fostered by the artificially cultivated fraudisms, and the result has spawned a damaging promulgation of ignorance, of hatred, of meanness, and of other forms of lower self activities. The Whigmore Party, the Whigs, being a highly influential part of the evolving United States body politics history at North America, was one of the two dominant and active hybrid European political parties having prominent political operations during the middle 1830s and up to the middle 1850s. The Whigmore Party grew out of the defunct National Republican Party and was formed mostly by that party's former members. And this formation was on or about the year 1834. Now, these Whigs members, in unity with others, were staunchly opposed to those British peoples, the Tories, and against the politics expressed via the Democratic Party. The conscience Whigs, the anti-slavery Whigs. The philosophical split or schism that developed within the Whigs Party due to the internal socialization and political conflictions became so strong as to cause the Whigs to become almost separate. And these two factions became known as the conscience Whigs on the one side and the cotton Whigs on as the other. And the conscience Whigs were known to be those European sons, daughters, and associate supporters among the Whigs who were in staunch opposition to slavery, imposed peonage, and human trafficking. Other sympathizers supporting liberties should also be taken into consideration, and the conscience Whigs were also generally active in organizations formed against the politically practiced and inherent escheatage, vassalage, and the peonage characteristics attributed to such human trafficking activities. The other is the Cotton Whigs, the pro-slavery Whigs. The more inhumane side of the Whigs Party was known as the Cotton Whigs and consisted of those members of the Whigs Party who were supportive of and politically promoting slavery, promoting human trafficking, and promoting peonage. Therefore, in your continued erudition on the expanded studies about the Whiggamore Party, the Whigs, and the related and associated subjects, take some time to review these issues and note the contradictions as evidenced within the parties. Nevertheless, all neophytes and scholars and adepts must cognate that whenever one is reflecting upon the social and political motives of the hybrid European sons and daughters doing business at or administrating government at the North Gate and across the planet, one must also strongly consider and be cognizant of King Hammurabi Bey's code of law. Why? Because all these hybrid Europeans know that they are hybrids and are always cognizant of the codes. These are, in fact, these are facts, even if they do not speak of them openly. And these ancient codes are primal point of social and political reference, and are known and studied by those who study jurisprudence and by those who are in operative government, legislate, or who legislate the rules and the laws of the planet Earth, Midgard. Even in these days, while not often spoken about publicly or openly, Hammurabi's codes, above all, were and are of absolute influence. And this immovable fact is mentally, politically, and analytically placed and fixed into the time period, social context. One must observe the subtle pressures of the codes in the thought processes of the Whigs and use one's knowledge about the codes as a social political backdrop. One is deemed through, with hesitance, though with hesitance to relate to the not so subtle yet established residual effects of the harsh parts of the codes as related to the declaration of the children of Israel, to slavery under the Moorish nation, and with reason and with discipline view these histories with objective analysis, knowing of the suppressed nature surrounding the same. Also note that many of the Southern members of the Whiggamore Party had sided with the Unionists in the conflict and in matters involving the secession of the Southern states from the Union, and other related activities and issues also broadened the breaches manifesting within the party during 1850. Now, the controversial, foul, and corrupt conditions and pressing questions caused by and involved with slavery and its social, economic, and political effects caused by exacerbated a split within the Whigs Party. And most influential in that split or schism, which marked the party, was a heated argument hostilities and destructive activities which took place in the multiple places in other territories at North America. And of particular note, and a very impacting interest upon the Whigs was known as the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Kansas-Nebraska Act, mark that down to put it in context with the politics that you're dealing with today. And one is reminded to expand one's studies on the nature of the controversy surrounding that subject and of the associated affairs conjoined to them. Therefore, research what is called the Kansas-Nebraska Act. And out from the heated and terse philosophical and political split came the creation of not only the noted schism within the Whigs Party, but also the development and formation of another party. That party that evolved from that political disjointment and disharmony is now known as the Republican Party. Keep that in mind. Now, the Republican Party in general is supporter of constitutional principles and treaty enforcement. The Cotton Whigs were mostly in favor of deceptively overthrowing the Republic and eschewing the properties of the Moors and tagging the Moors as Negroes, Blacks, Indians, etc., to remove them from authority in superior position of consular court venues of the treaties and the Constitution in order to supplant the peoples of the land and enforce the unum sanctum operations. And this is where the misinformation of the fake race argument has its origin that has been promoted to this very day to cover up the real activities of the Whigamores and the unum sanctum operations and the doctrines of discovery. This is why you see whenever there was a case of Aboriginal people in conflict with their land, that the hybrid Europeans set up the Bureau of Indian Affairs in order to assume jurisdiction over the affairs of the Moors who agreed to be called Indians to under the guise of retaining their sovereign rights to the treaties and to the land. And under that guise of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the hybrid Europeans would systematically, over the centuries, steal the land, steal the resources, and that practice has continued to this very day and is generally referred to as gentrification, i.e., there's the Whigamore parties and there's your politics that you see taking place to this very day. And in reference to people who may not understand the politics, this is why you see much of the opposition from the Cotton Whigs, which you know as the Democratic Party, against Donald Trump, who ran for office under the guise of the Republican Party, who is also against Donald Trump, because Donald Trump has been operationally making efforts to restore the constitutions and the treaty enforcements. And this is part of the conflict that's going on to this very day. And it's absolutely Whigamores battling each other over the Moorish estate to this very day. So understand the politics and don't be fooled by people who are distracting you to other issues, including the fake race argument and the fake Black Lives Matter paradigm, which they've been using to pit people against each other and then conquer them after they destroy their own communities. At the time, I will yield the floor, Dr. Naylor. Any comments that you have?
Let me see.
Also, for any interjections of yourself.
Somebody put in, noted the names, conscience or conscience and cotton.
Conscience Whigs and Cotton Whigs. Those are the two parties that have been disguised in the modern day, not so much disguised, but that you see pretty much in the monopoly operations um, at North America, known to the general public as the Republican Party, which is the conscience Whigs. That's CONSCIENCE Whigs, and the Cotton Whigs.
It's written almost like conscience.
That's what it is.
And so are they stating, are they implying
Conscience,
that they have more,
meaning that the conscience Whigs were the Whigs that were more honorable to the Constitution and the treaties. The Cotton Whigs were among members of the Roman Curia and secret members of the Circle Church and the Chancery, who, in fact, were among those who actually plotted and succeeded in the assassination of Lincoln in order to overthrow the republic.
well, I think it is ironic that the what became the Demo Party was called they call themselves Cotton Whigs, when according to his story there was a picking cotton.
That's what it symbolizes. In other words, now keep in mind, because people also need to really
a lot of symbolism exists.
It is, and people need to understand that one of the things that the hybrid Europeans were doing were stealing the Bonnevilles and murdering the Aboriginal people. You know, like a lot of times when people see pictures of
Bonnevilles with those small ships.
Bonnevilles were some of these places that you've been calling plantations that weren't really European hybrids. They were actually Moors on the land. A lot of times they'll show you pictures and say that those people were slaves,
and they were
not.
Yeah,
they were the owners.
Right.
So the whole history has really been corrupted. And it's unfortunate because many of our people have been following that line for many generations.
Well, that's why I said, they would, once they were able to take pictures, I can see them coming through the various areas, and I'm talking about the Europeans, and said, "Hey, why don't you line up so I can take a picture? Oh, you get all the family together," and now they work their own fields.
Some of them were just simply pictures from archives of families whatsoever, and then presented in a false paradigm.
Because weren't there? I heard Scott McKay say that we're over 2,500. He didn't say melanated, but he said black slave owners.
Sure.
During that time.
See, this is why now. This is back to Hammurabi Bay. See, this is the unfortunate situation that's happening at North America and what's happening in the world. By the hybrid Europeans, when they overthrew the Moorish Empire, and then keep in mind, we lost America before we lost Germany and Iberia. That must be understood. And the reconstruction of the history has to do with many of the hybrid Europeans are taking credit for servitude activities that actually was reversed. Was not, because slave is really an identity of the Slavic peoples. Now it's been used connotatively in contemporary construction of history, but it is improperly used. It's actually Slovakian. And so the slave in general applied to hybrid Europeans, although it is used contemporarily and wrongly in history to as from a connotative perspective to designate people who have been put into servitude or into peonage. And so another part of the unfortunate result of reconstructed history is that the hybrid Europeans have been credited with a lot of criminal enslavement that was actually themselves not in reverse. And so, again, when people know the real history, the guilt of human suffering is on both sides. It's not like one-sided the way they've been telling it. And furthermore, many hybrid Europeans, when held in servitude, were also listed as blacks. and Negroes. That's another thing that's been misrepresented. And also, one of your largest biggest slaveholders at the Maghreb or at North America was a Moor.
Anthony Johnson.
Yes. And it's and for us to fix this social economic problem that we have today, that's been exported around the world. The truth must be told in order for us to fix things. Meaning that if you're not honest about or truthful about the true chronology and history of the walk of man, particularly in North America, we're not going to correct anything. And we must take responsibility, all of us, for the enforcement of the treaties and the Constitution for the United States, which comes from honesty confederation. That comes from us. Those principles are Moorish principles. They're fatwa. And even when you hear people talk about fatwa, they'll talk it in a negative when actually the Constitution for the United States comes from fatwa law, come from the Moors. It didn't come from the hybrid Europeans. And people need to understand. This is why it's important for people to understand or to look into American history in context with the Napoleonic Wars, because it was actually during those wars as they took over the monarchies of Iberia, i.e., Europe. Much of the corruption that we're experiencing today, they've been using dark magic, Babylonian magic, to rule the world ruthlessly.
Speaking of dark magic and Babylonian magic, I'm reading Synchronicity and the Seventh Seal.
Oh, Peter Moon, yeah.
Peter Moon. And so getting into it, I realized that dark magic was being used because that's what's in here, as well as Noble Drew Ali in here. So you got Ron L. Hubbard, you got Aleister Crowley, you got Jack Parsons. Yeah, you got Amshat Ashram.
Yes.
Y'all, I'm telling you about a book that y'all need to go and get so we can all talk about this book. Got to be read. But can I share something
freely? Because I want to just make this note with you, Dr. Aguilar.
Go ahead.
You will see. Remember, like Noble Drew Ali said, you're gonna make the European tell the truth.
Yes.
Now, and as we mentioned over the years, as the middle class of the hybrid Europeans have been thrown under the bus as true history starts coming about. And the truth about the Whiggamore Party operations, they just don't say Whiggamores. They'll just say the Democrats and the Republicans. Understand you're talking about the Whiggamores. Mm-hmm. As this comes out and all the corruption that has taken place on the planet since the Napoleonic Wars, etc., they didn't expect to be thrown under the bus. And so they're starting to expose some of the real history. And logically, people who don't know a background, won't put it in context. But once you have some of the actual historical records, you can understand the Moorish Divine and National Movement. You can understand the motive of Noble Drew Ali. You can understand when Noble Drew Ali set up the Divine and National Movement and the old Canaanite temple. You'll understand the opposition coming from the Queen of England. You can also understand why the Queen said he is who he said he is, given what he wants, etc. You also recognize why the different nations of the earth recognize Noble Drew Ali, because they recognize the real politics. You'll understand the motive of the infiltration with J. Edgar Hoover and the COINTELPRO operations. You'll understand even more about the history in relationship to Noble Drew Ali when you really understand the actual history, some of which I shared with you. Now let's share with us some of Peter Moon's writing.
Yeah, so in chapter 35, because I've kind of like been bouncing around since it.
Well, you can't help because there's so much, really, right. And you try to give pertinent points to inspire the people to be more honest, to do some research, to remove their biases, to remove their hatreds, to deal with facts, and to come together with people from all walks of life to make life better on this planet for humanity, period. which
Okay.
is the mission of the Moorish movement.
All right. I'm going to read. This is second chapter in second paragraph. I'm sorry, chapter 35. After reading Peter Wilson's Sacred Drift, and I just ordered that book, I was a bit astonished to find out independently that Drew Ali was not only a real character in our history who not only appeared in the newspapers of his time, but has a substantial FBI file, the entirety of which has not been released to the public at this time. In fact, he was doggedly scrutinized by J. Edgar Hoover's FBI during the Roaring Twenties. Although he was by no means the first black Muslim in America, he is believed to be the first black Muslim prophet. It is not surprising, and understand this is written by Albion. Okay. So it is not surprising that he has been obscured and forgotten by most white historians, but it is even more alarming that the majority of his fellow African Americans are equally ignorant of his incredible life. It will send the shock of ignorance through many people's nervous systems to learn that Duali's murder was a pivotal point in history, which eventually gave rise to contemporary or recognized figures such as Louis Farrakhan, Malcolm X, and Elijah Muhammad. Although these characters are not known to have shed any light on Drew Ali or his heritage, they would never have risen to their aggrandized station in life had it not been for his legacy. Can I continue?
Yes, go ahead.
Uh,
Until you feel that what you've shared has context for the people.
okay.
So things must be put in context.
Right. So Drew Ali's origins are somewhat obscure, and his life has taken on legendary proportions at times, but he definitely did exist. He was born on January 8th, 1886, in North Carolina. His mother was a Cherokee, and his father was of Moorish descent. His parents are believed to have met and studied under a quote unquote master adept known as Jamal al-Din al-Agani, who visited the U.S. from 1882 1883. At this time, they were initiated into an Islamic sect known as the Brethren of Purity, an Ismaili faction from Cairo, which sought to preserve the knowledge lost from the Alexandria Library. Although Peter Wilson suggests Drew Ali may have been a circus magician as a young man, it is pretty safe that he was skilled in his trade. You can clearly see his influence later on in his life when circus style posters were used by him to draw big crowds for his religious gatherings. I'm not saying whether this stuff is true or not, but it's what he written. Prior to World War I, he visited Egypt, met the last priest of an ancient cult who took him into the Great Pyramid blindfolded. When Drew Ali made his way out unassisted, the priest initiated him and gave him the name Sharif Abdul Ali. On this trip to the Mideast, Ali put together a book known as the Circle 7 Quran. Upon his return to America, he became known as Drew Ali. In Newark, New Jersey, at the age of 27, he had a dream where he was ordered to start a religion, quote unquote, for uplifting of fallen mankind with particular attention to the black race. He believed that blacks are genuinely Moors who were descendants of the biblical Moabites and later inhabited what is now the country of Morocco. Although Ali's Circle 7 Quran had been picked apart by scholars and found to be largely borrowed from other texts, including the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus Christ, the origins and secrets of Ali's Moorish Science Temple are far more obscure and mysterious. When one studies mystery schools, it is wise to remember that there is usually an outward front, but also an inner circle that is much more mysterious and often revolves around a character or entity which seeks to remain invisible. By all appearances, Drew Ali was a kind and loving man who sought no conflict with white people. In fact, he specifically stated that whites, this is interesting, could claim the same status as blacks by declaring themselves to be Celts or Celts and therefore Asiatic. The Celts originated in Central Asia and migrated to the British Isles via Africa. The Moorish Science Temple was predominantly black, but was not exclusive in terms of race. Ali's purpose was not only to correct the horrible wrongs that had been committed against the people of his own heritage, it was also to restore the lost wisdom that they once possessed, which had enlightened the Western world for several centuries. And I'm going to stop right there because there's a lot more. But that right there um, is a lot. And the fact that, I think what struck me in that, one of the things, not
how much has been held back on the people.
Well, and that he has it as a as a modern European feels like his own people don't know who he is.
Right.
They don't know who they are, so they don't know who he is.
Yes. But keep in mind with the infiltration, when you do research in the FBI papers, you will see that many of the people who became in those periods of time sheiks and sheikesses in the temple were actually plants of pastors and ministers, 33-degree Masons from the church, whose mission was to neutralize it because of the effect of the membership that was happening with the churches and the synagogues, with people coming into the Moorish movement from both of those orders, and he was considered an economic and political threat. So this is where you get also a lot of the activities of the great sellout that people mention but don't talk about, and that would be this is why we already know that many scholars who have that information don't share that information with members of the Moorish Science Temple, so they don't recognize the motives of many of the people who are also still governing within the movement, etc., and who have credible positions. But when you start doing the research, you'll recognize who's who by their activities and also by the lack of certain activities.
Well, I think the thing that I found interesting in here that this was tied in with this, not just there's several chapters in here about Prophet Noble Drew Ali, but it's tied in with the fact that there was a lot of, like you said, sorcery. I call it sorcery and debauchery and so people like the Dianetics movement and stuff, which now makes a lot of sense as to why maybe certain people are their people through clearing via Dianetics, because there's some early back in the 20s and 30s connection between that nation and this kind of movement. I mean, I didn't know how far it went back. I thought this was just something that came up in the 20th century, 21st, beginning of the 21st century. But no, there's a connection that goes way back.
The interesting thing that when you're looking at this stuff from a position of scholarship, you recognize the important role that Drew Ali played in American politics that's not credited to the platform. And also the fact that much of what work that he's done is absolutely civic in character, but not credited as being civic in character.
At least a religious organization.
Yes, the affidavit. See, this is why it's important for people to look at the affidavit on the back of the questionnaire. When you look at the affidavit on the back of the questionnaire, you'll see that the Moorish Science Temple of America was adopted with the religious affidavit in 1928. And that, when you start doing the research in the FBI papers, you'll recognize it was a counter move on his part to protect the movement from the infiltration that had already taken place. So when people, and this is why you won't see them talking about the Moorish Holy Temple of Science being a civic organization, which is clearly there. The literature from the Moorish Science Temple of America, when I read that before, like if you had that, you can see where the Moorish Holy Temple of Science is a civic organization. The religious affidavit was adopted in 1928. So the old Canaanite temple was established in 1913. And then when you look at the operations of the Wilson administration as a counter move on Jekyll Island, you understand the entirety of the politics. Absolutely. Then when you recognize the infiltration that took place in the 20s, right? You'll recognize when he set up the old Canaanite, Moorish Holy Temple of Science Civic Organization 25 and 26, and then you look into corporation bankruptcies in 1925. You see the United States Corporation at that time went bankrupt. And this is why a lot of people who don't understand the politics or understand the reality of the politics will sometimes say Noble Drew Ali bankrupted the United States. They understand that because the deal of it is because these people are de facto and the real sovereign actually stood up. But the people also were in a process of learning. People still didn't know the true message of Noble Drew Ali. That part of it is the restoration of the estate and the true rulers of the land, i.e., which is the people who have been subjugated under the black codes. Who even to this day keep thinking it's a religious argument, don't even know it's an issue of birthright. But the more and more when you start doing research, when you start looking at it from a perspective of scholarship, like Peter Moon, other hybrid Europeans, etc., who are looking at it more objectively, even though some of them still may be using connotative linguistics, you understand that they're looking at it from a research perspective,
Right.
not from a clubism or necessarily a biased position. They're just looking at things that surprised them as they found out the real politics of North America. And it was kind of shocking to some of them because it's not what they expected. However, like he said, the more interesting thing is to recognize how many of the people of the land don't know this history, don't know this politics. But again, you know why we do what we do here at the House of Remaking Minds. We try to share things with the people that wake them up, that have been held back by both hybrid Europeans and so-called black scholars. And it's really kind of like disheartening and disgusting, but you can't get disgusted. You got to get the work done. How you say, don't complain about trash on the ground, pick it up.
Yeah, definitely. Something that you live by.
And then you also understand why when you start giving this information, why trolls come out like roaches. Why? Because it changes the whole political paradigm that the people have been living under for decades, for a century. Actually, they don't know the real history of North America. And again, the politics. You see how people are arguing about the politics and they don't even know that these parties are the Whigamores? They don't even know that the problems that they're having from these political parties is arguments within the Whigamores among themselves over your estate.
Yeah.
They don't even know that these black tags and stuff come from them. They don't even know that these hybrid Europeans aren't white people, that we're the white people. They traded places with these. That's why they did the movie Traded Places at Philadelphia, at Shakamatsu. That was strategic. That's a message. Even like we all know why the Mummer's Parade takes place. Only related to this. And how many people don't even know that the Mummer's Parade operations are related to this?
And what was the other? Where's the other place? And the other one is the Mardi Gras.
Mardi Gras. And this is why in the Louisiana Purchase, when they ran us, and many of our families is from the Powhatan Confederation. Whether you're talking about the Seminole, the Washita, the talking about Matoaka. The whole thing about Matoaka that they fake up and call Pocahontas, which is a fictional name. And they're taking over, and the Trail of Tears. All of these are Moors. And they separate us, making us think that we different people. Then they made up that other term, Native American, African American, to twist us from each other, make us think that we're different people. Schism. All that is schism. All that is fiction. But the fact of the matter is, it's been operative among our own people, which is again why our people are disconnected from the land, disconnected from the treaties, disconnected from constitutional enforcement, because they don't see themselves. They don't even know it came from them. However, it's good that some of the hybrid Europeans, are telling the truth now, because it's in everybody's interest. Because now many of the hybrid, the dark They might call themselves demon Satan worshippers, etc., and human sacrificers among the hybrid Europeans who've been destroying the planet and destroying the world. It's like it's in everybody's interest to start telling the truth now, and it actually seems like they're out to lunch. However, the reality is the truth must be told in order to bring humanity back to a point of civilization, so that civilization itself doesn't collapse under the I say corruption of the hybrid operators under the unum sanctum policy. Because the world, they've corrupted so many governments on the planet and destabilized the whole planet. Now it's sort of like it's in everybody's interest now to start telling the truth, and they've been lying for so many generations. They don't even know how to tell the truth right. However, some of them are starting to tell the truth. And there's some other points that Peter shared with the people that you feel that are relative to comprehending the operations of the cotton wigs and the consigns wigs and their battle over the Moorish estate. Share that.
Um, I just think it's so much in this book. It needs to be. It would be a good thing for to have discussions over and have others read it, because the way as he writes is a mixture of a
Sort of like a
theatrical
story form.
a story form, but truth, and
because it's really in harmony with in some ways with, even like you see how a lot of Moors, of course the country, some of the dances that they do, etc., the nature of the dance, the shaking of the shoulders, etc., the wiggling of the hips, the stepping, etc., the jumping, the kicking, etc. Those are ancient traditions, and although the people may have forgotten some of the traditions or the nature of replication of acts or nature, the animals in nature, etc., and how nature works and the symbolism of operations of nature, a lot of them forget that. However, when you start researching, you can still see the tracing back to the ancient world. A lot of things haven't changed in the different territories. It's just that the people don't recognize their relationship to each other. But that'll come together in due time. But again, as we were mentioning earlier, it's important for people, just like Drew Ali said. Hopefully, we can get rid of some of these ancient hatreds. But if the people don't know the histories, they have limited or no knowledge of how a lot of these hatreds have their origin. A lot of these distrusts have their origin. When they know this real history, the politicians and the both local and federal and state can no longer fool the people because they understand their motives. Why it's important for the people to understand, if they don't know the Whigamo Party and they're talking about these politics today, they're 90% wrong. Doesn't mean that they're lacking intelligence. They lack information. And so their concepts are wrong because the root of the information that was given to them is incorrect. However, having this knowledge also empowers our people to be more competent in their ongoing activities of taking their proper places among the affairs of men and reinstituting their obligations to enforce the supreme law of the land, which are the treaties and the Constitution for the United States, of which Donald Trump is in harmony with. And so people who are angry with him really need to know the history to kind of understand the politics. And that's not a sanctioning, and that's not, like I said before, I'm not saying or putting Donald Trump in front about anything, because the United States corporation is dead. Politically is dead. It's just that the people are still in a state of civil litter mortuus, of which we're doing the best that we can, along with others, to bring our people out of that state of civil litter mortuus and bringing them to a state of in full life activities, etc. And then from among our people, trusting that people would good intentions and with pure hearts will become active in reestablishing or activating the actual political forums by which we take our places among the affairs of men via their consular obligations in relationship to Act 1 of the Divine Constitution and Bylaws, etc., demonstrated via the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, etc., and activated properly with a cognizance of the civic platform from which that was constructed with the Moorish Holy Temple of Science as a ground of training and practice within our order, and then taken out into the world. When you take it out into the world, now you're in a consular venue via treaty and constitution, distinguished from internal affairs. So that would be international affairs, etc. And this is why it's important for people to really understand when Raleigh say enforce the Constitution, he's talking to treaties. Because our people think that the Constitution itself is the law, supreme law by itself. No, it's the treaties in the Constitution. That's why it's important for people to recognize Article 3, Article 4, Section 4, and Article 6, Supremacy Clause. Also, why in the nobility clauses, etc., of the Constitution, particularly when you're talking original article of Amendment 13 with its 20 section referred to as a 1320, why that's not exposed or taught to the people. And also the people need to recognize why Pharisees and Sadducees by law, by fatwa, were not allowed to be hold office in government as they were actually knights for the papacy after the Napoleonic Wars to overthrow all the republic orders, etc., and to enslave humanity, which has been taking place all around the world, and particularly rooted from North America, from Canaan land that you call Canada now, and the United States corporation operations, which are actually a singular operation appearing to be separate for the sake of the people, but in fact are both operated from the Circle Church and the Chancery of from Fleet Street, England, under the powers of the Popes of Rome, etc., and the Vatican's P2 Masons, etc. And keep in mind, do not confuse astrology, which is masonry, as just belonging to the hybrid Europeans, although you see a lot of the damage that they've done on the world by misusing it or using it for dark purposes, etc. Actually, masonry is more science, in fact. Now, that's also the truth that a lot of people aren't told because it's always given a negative. And it's given a negative mainly because of people many who have belonged to the Freemason order under the Roman Curia have done so much damage to humanity. So they're looking at the masonry as a principle of negativity when it's not that. It is actually those who have misused the knowledge and held the knowledge back from the masses and have actually mismanaged the operations of government around the planet for the purpose of world domination and hybrid European hegemony. That's the problem. So the real heirs to that knowledge, to the compass and the square, for those of you who may not have clarity because of limitation of time of some reference point, for those of you who have a Circle 7 Quran, read chapter 5 and also read chapter 23 and read chapter 47. And it would help you a lot in comprehending the philosophies of the Moors, etc., and also of what is commonly referred to in the Bible as the carpenter's tool, Jesus' carpenter's tool. And you know, Jesus means justice. And when it's presented biblically, it's an anthropomorphic presentment of the cosmos and the transits of the sun, and also cause and effect operations on planet Midgard, this particular planet we call Earth Midgard, etc. And our obligations here, while we are restoring proper stewardship of operations on the planet. There's some other points of reference you can make.
Yeah, because I see this every now and then, but here's one says, "Ha, stop with that consular madness. Go research the word and know it applies to foreigners on the soil of another."
Yes, it does. That's because consular venue is where all treaties are enforced around the world.
There's some
That's
that
a venue. That's not a court by itself. That's when a court changes venue when issues of controversy come about between citizens and nationals of different political states. So when you're talking states, you're also talking nations. So you're talking venue. That's all over the world. And anyone that has what you call a diversity of nationality, whenever there's an issue of nationality, this is another reason why many of the private POW camps have been tacked with Moors under the Christian black codes because they've been held artificially in a dead status. And those persons among themselves who claim rulership or viziership or any positions of power were actually listing themselves under the 14th Amendment of civil rights instead of nationals or the people of the land and enforcing international law. And all arguments were to be held in a consular venue. For those who doubt that, read Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution for the United States. And keep in mind, Noble Drew Ali said, "Help me in my great missionary work to bring my people back into the constitutional fold of government enforcing our Constitution for the United States." And you'll find that in a divine warning by the prophet for the nations. So if you're nationalized, you do not operate under the black codes. Any controversy would be a consular venue. That is a political venue. And any venue where controversy is held between people of different nation states would be a consular venue. And that's a fact.
Thank you for that. Here, Curtis Jones says, "I've read he," and I think he this referred to Noel Drew Ali, had a lot to do with nation slash state as well. When he died, the Vatican was the first, in quotes, to start right after using Drew Ali's groundwork.
Yeah. Well, of course, the major issue is this is why people need to know the history. That's like when we came into this, because we can't go through all of it. I say study the Napoleonic Wars from 1803 to 1815, because when they're teaching history of America, they do not include the Napoleonic Wars because they don't want people to tie back to Iberia, because you know that Iberia is Europe. Then when you know Iberia, then you trace back to Phoenicia, Nefertiti's daughter. Then you start recognizing Germany was actually Moorish. Then when you go into Iberian history, or what you call European history, you'll find that all the nobles were Moors. That's why a good book for those of you who have not been properly made erudite in the history of Iberia and America. One of the most awarded scholars in the world, named Joel A. Rogers, wrote a book called Nature Knows No Color Line, and started looking at the coats of arms of the real Picts and Moors or nobles of Iberia or Europe, and she will see that they're all Moors, Aboriginal Moors, not
no, second shelf. No, down. One more shelf down. Right there. Push back. Look back. The white book standing up.
Wait.
See the white book behind that?
Oh yes. Matter of fact, Nature Knows No Color Line, and you'll find that the jurisprudence that is used today around the world came from you all, and you're not black, you're Moors. Get over it. You know what you find is that when people, because when you start finding out the truth about Iberia, i.e., Europe, etc., those are noble families of Europe. Your concepts have been all wrong. That's why Noble Drawley says your concepts are all wrong. And so when the hybrid Europeans took over Iberia, the concepts are that many of those old castles, etc., in Germany, Scotland, they don't even know that Scot actually means dark.
Well, you got the last king of Scotland, and who played the?
No, they tell you even, like when you mentioned that, Dr. Naila, they tell you in different ways. But if you're not aware of this history, it doesn't dawn on you that you were the sovereigns or the monarchs that were overthrown. And the monarchies came from the pharaohs. It was the matriarchs. When you really study the history, not from the hybrid perspective that he's told you, those monarchs that were overthrown are really the matriarchs of the Moorish Moabite nation, which came from the ancient pharaohs of Egypt, that you call Egypt. All of them are Berber descent, Berber linguistic groups, Bantu, Mandinka, etc., all over the world. And the sooner you get real about the real politics and have a real comprehension and understanding of the jurisdictional powers of ancient Hutukta that you call Egypt, expand the world, not just on the east side of Amexem, the entire world. When you're looking at Tennessee um, area, Tennessee, Kentucky area, looking at Lower Egypt, it's a fact. That's the fact. Get over it. You look at those mounds and the pyramids all over the America. All of those are ancient, and some of them are even older on this side than they are on that side. So don't look at them as separate. Look at them as just being the land separated by a great earthquake. That's all. Mississippi was built by hand. By hand. It was not a natural river. It flows both ways, according to the seasons. While we build mounds all along it. It's also dealing with the freshwater routes up to the Great Lakes, which are also built for fresh water for the entire Western Maghreb. That's the truth. Get over it. One of the points of reference for conquest for the hybrids is to steal a lot of Moorish history. And the Whiggamore Party is a perfect example. Even the name of the parties, Whig or Moor, they put on wigs to imitate the Moors. They've been stealing your estate for the last couple centuries. Get over it. They've been trading places. So now, we've done enough damage on the planet. It's time to start telling the truth. Start fixing things up. Start learning of your higher self and your lower self. Start moving to the dark side and start moving to the higher self. So your higher planes of life are really the dimensions. They're states of mind. And so when you're coming into fourth and fifth and sixth dimension, it's a consciousness. It's an energy. It's a consciousness and a connection to nature and the operations of reality. Not a place to go, country to be reached. So heaven is a state of mind, the activation of the pineal gland. And as the pineal gland activates, you will enter into what they call more dimensional consciousness. And of course, that's conjoined by the operations of Saturn, Uranus, and Jupiter lining up, etc., what they call the activities of the coming again of Jesus or the Son of God, symbolizes anthropomorphically actually the entry of the energies of the Aquarian age and the dying of the priesthood whose spookiness and misrepresentation of religion had its root in the Piscean age. All that means anthropomorphically. So you're dealing with the cosmo, return of Jesus, etc., or justice. There you go. Get used to it.
Now, one of the things I found interesting also when reading this book is where